This is a video that I've been meaning to make for a while as a Star Wars fan. A very, very avid Star Wars fan. I have been in love with this franchise for almost my whole life, ever since I was 5 years old. I was introduced with the prequel trilogy, blah, blah, blah. You don't need to hear my history on it, but this is a video that I've been meaning to make since the Rise of Skywalker released. By this point, I've seen it 3 times to kind of solidify my thoughts on it. At first, I was going to make this video a review of the Rise of Skywalker, then I wanted it to be a review of that / a discussion about Star Wars as a whole. But now I kind of want it more to be maybe just a discussion of things that the Rise of Skywalker has brought up in terms of plot points and controversies and all of that, and then a discussion of the Star Wars franchise in its current state. So I'll try and keep it pretty quick. I don't know, I've already tried this a couple times and it's kind of lasted too long without actually getting any of my points across, so I'll try to make this one a little bit faster and more to the point. So I'll start with my points on the Rise of Skywalker and the plot points that it brought up and my opinions on those plot points. So my overall opinion of the movie is almost the average of what I've seen online, and that is that it's a mediocre movie, a mediocre Star Wars movie, I think. And, you know, the pacing, too fast, all that. It's very much a cleanup, as people have described it. J.J. Abrams trying to clean up the mess of The Last Jedi and the stuff that came along with The Last Jedi's release. So, some points from the movie that I'd like to discuss very quickly that have been talked about a lot. Rey. Mary Sue. That's been brought up since The Force Awakens back in 2015, but I'd like to give my final, now that 3 movies are out on Rey, and her being a Mary Sue, being too powerful for somebody with too little training, I just like to quickly make the point that Luke is almost the exact same in the original trilogy. Luke did not get any, in the first movie, he did not get any training at all. Besides the little training he did with the probe on the Falcon, he really didn't get any training. And yeah, he had Obi-Wan helping him as a manifestation of the Force, but really he didn't get all too much training. In Empire, he quit his training early, and that's why he failed against Darth Vader. In Return of the Jedi, yes, he became a true Jedi, and there was a little bit of time in between Empire and Return, but overall Luke didn't get that much training either, and he still became one of the greatest Jedi of all time. So I really have no problem with Rey being a Mary Sue, if that's what you want to call her, somebody who is very likable without actually having a reason to be liked. Just everybody likes her, she's super powerful, no training. I really don't mind it at all. I like the idea of somebody being able to be just that skilled. I have no problem with that. Another point that I'd like to discuss is the Palpatine Snoke stuff. If I look down, it's because I have the points written on my phone. So the Palpatine and Snoke stuff, it's pretty much all answered in the first 5 minutes of the film, and that is where I can agree with a lot of the hatred and the anger that I've seen in fans online. You get those answers so quickly because J.J. Abrams wants you to kind of almost forget it. He wants to move on. He wants to tell the rest of the story without you worrying about, oh, well, you've seen all the promotions. How, oh my God, how is Palpatine alive? Oh, so Snoke worthless? Yes, Snoke. I'll talk about Snoke real quickly because Palpatine also spoke about Snoke very quickly. He answers the question of Snoke in a single line and a single visual point. Kylo enters the Exegol temple where Palpatine is, and Kylo threatens to kill Palpatine the same way that he killed Snoke, and Palpatine is like, well, I made Snoke. There's your answer. That is Snoke's background story right there. And you get a visual of Snoke's body in a little liquid pod of some sort, indicating that he might be a clone or just a creation of the Force through Palpatine's power. Um, Honestly, I'm okay with it. I'm not saying that Snoke needed a super serious background story, but it does a little bit frustrate me that it basically makes Snoke worthless in that the power was never really Snoke's. Snoke was a puppet, and there was just no indication of that in the other two films, Force Awakens and Last Jedi, and we know it's because Palpatine was never meant to return. But so you know what, that's my true opinion on it. Snoke being a puppet kind of hurts, but you know what, with Palpatine coming back as that being the answer, I'm okay with it. Not happy, but okay with it. I'm okay. Now, as for Palpatine's return, I can't say that I'm satisfied. I'm okay with the idea of him being back. But like I said before, J.J. Abrams really wants you to forget it very quickly how he came back. And I kid you not, his entire explanation for his own return, for Palpatine's return, is said through a prequel quote. Palpatine says that he has died before, and in his prequel quote, the dark side of the Force is a pathway to many abilities some consider to be unnatural. That is his explanation for how he's back. Now, I know I've seen some leaks on the internet of the Rise of Skywalker novelization, and that it touches on Palpatine possibly being a clone and blah blah blah. But you shouldn't have to read the book to know that. That should be covered in the film. I love reading, but it's a film. The film shouldn't require a book. You shouldn't have to see them. You shouldn't have to watch the movie and then be like, that didn't give me all the answers. Let me go read the book. You shouldn't have to do that as a film watcher. So no, I'm not satisfied with Palpatine's return because the movie just doesn't explain it. Maybe the novelization will make me, in terms of the canon, happy with it, but from the movie standpoint, no, I'm not happy with that. But it's what it is. Let's see, I wrote down Finn. I have 2 more points here. So Finn, I agree with everybody on Finn. His arc was just very confusing in the trilogy. It was kind of complete by the end of The Force Awakens and then undermined in The Last Jedi. And then in The Rise of Skywalker, it's hinted very heavily that he is Force sensitive, but this is the last movie of the saga in the trilogy. So for him to be hinted at being Force sensitive, but for it to go almost nowhere and used about 1 or 2 times in the actual film, it's sloppy writing. Sorry to say that, but I'll move on from that. And my final point about the movie, because I want to get on to the bulk of this for me is the Star Wars franchise as a whole. So my final point here is Anakin's legacy as the chosen one. This one I'm half and half on. A lot of people say that Rey being the final one to kill Palpatine and getting rid of the Sith undermines Anakin's entire arc. Him being the chosen one, the prophecy saying that he is the chosen one. So my opinion on that is that so Anakin, of course, in Return of the Jedi, Darth Vader, however you want to see it, he does redeem himself. That is not something that changes with the Rise of Skywalker. Anakin redeemed himself by saving his son, Luke, throwing Palpatine into the pit and whatnot, and redeeming himself, turning back to the light, and becoming Anakin once more. So his arc, to me, is still complete. Rey does not undermine his arc. Does she undermine his legacy as the chosen one? A little bit. Just a little bit, because of how much time was in between. I understand that evil always exists. It always will. You don't just defeat a threat and then have peace for eternity. But it's the fact that there's only like 30 years between Return of the Jedi and the new trilogy that makes the legacy and the chosen one prophecy seem a little bit... Because the prophecy was definitely foretold thousands and thousands of years before Anakin was even born. So for him to complete this prophecy, and then for it to be basically undermined only 30 years later, a little rough. I understand, again, evil is always there, but then also for it to be the exact same threat that he was said to destroy. He was said to destroy the Sith, and he did, kind of, but Palpatine, as the movie suggests, has been behind everything. The First Order, all of that has been behind it all. So really, did he fulfill the prophecy of destroying the Sith? I guess not really. I guess Rey kind of did. So as the Chosen One, is Anakin the Chosen One? Canonically, yes. But from a storytelling point of view, it's kind of rough to call him the Chosen One. Is his arc undermined, though? Absolutely not. So I guess that's the consensus on my point of view for Anakin. Is his arc undermined? No. Is his prophecy, the Chosen One stuff, undermined? Yeah, a little bit. So those are my main, the points I wanted to hit with The Rise of Skywalker. And just overall, I consider it a mediocre film. People are completely trashing it, saying it's the worst one yet. Either that or The Last Jedi. It's the worst one yet. To that, I say it's The Phantom Menace. I'm sorry, I do. I think The Phantom Menace is the worst Star Wars film. I don't think any Star Wars film that could ever possibly come out could ever be as bad as The Phantom Menace. So no, The Rise of Skywalker to me doesn't even come as close to being as bad as The Phantom Menace. I think it lands in the middle. It's mediocre. My final point on the movie, and then I'll move on to Star Wars as a whole. My final point on the movie is that it was very heavily advertised as the end of the saga. You know, like almost every advertisement you saw had the text saying the end of a saga, or every saga has an end, or see the finale, blah, blah, blah. It was very heavily advertised as the end of the Skywalker saga. To me, that hurts its reputation because I don't see it as a good conclusion to the Skywalker saga. I really do not. Return of the Jedi really closed off everything beautifully, in my opinion, better than any other future film possibly could, even if the Skywalker saga were to keep going after this. And I don't think The Rise of Skywalker should... Yes, it technically is the end of the Skywalker saga, but I try very hard not to look at it that way. When you even just compare the final shot of Return of the Jedi with Luke looking at the Force ghosts of Obi-Wan, Yoda, and his own father, who is now a manifestation of the Force like other Jedi, Return to the Light, versus Rey, spoilers here I guess, but I mean, come on, it's March now. Rey looking into the sun on Tatooine with BB-8. I just don't see it as... And it's a very fan servicey kind of final shot as well. So that hurts a little bit. So I would say the Rise of Skywalker... Final point, I promise, about the film. Rise of Skywalker is good as a trilogy closer, but as a saga closer, no. I just can't consider it the best way to close the saga. So now I'm going to move on from The Rise of Skywalker itself to my current analysis of the Star Wars franchise as a whole, where it stands in the hands of Disney and where we, the consumer, look at it as, and the Star Wars fans and such. And my first 2 points on here are Star Wars fans and hypocrisy. So, yeah, I think Star Wars fans are the biggest hypocrites on the planet. And where I come from with that is that there was a time where there was a trilogy. Star Wars had 2 trilogies, the original and the prequel. One of them was beloved, considered untouchable, considered the godlike trilogy that just couldn't be perfected in any other way. We all know which one that is. It's the original trilogy. I'm not disagreeing or agreeing with that, but we know that that's the case for the most part with the original trilogy. I dare you to find somebody who finds a problem, or I mean there's problems, but who says the original trilogy is bad, or the worst trilogy out of the saga. I dare you to find somebody who says that. Now moving on to the prequel trilogy. We all know what happened. We can't lie about the history of the prequel trilogy. When it came out, there was this hype, major hype, because Star Wars returning, all of that stuff. And then, as time went on, Star Wars fans began to realize, man, those weren't that great. We can appreciate them for what they were and what George Lucas tried to do with them, but overall, they weren't that great. That was the consensus for a while. Then, George Lucas kind of got bullied about all of it. Actors got bullied. George Lucas got bullied. He got bullied for ruining his own franchise, is what many people said. Oh my God, how could he do this after the original trilogy? The prequels are terrible. And then all these years pass, George Lucas doesn't think, George Lucas had his sequel trilogy written out. But he probably assumed after all this hatred online that he was no longer capable of telling the story the way he wanted to. So what did he do? He sold the franchise to Disney for a lot of money, as we know. And then what happens? The most hypocritical thing ever, the most backstabbing thing the Star Wars fans could do. I don't know. I don't necessarily know if it happened before or after the release of The Force Awakens, because I took a long hiatus from liking Star Wars and being into it from my childhood to when The Force Awakens released. The Force Awakens really got me back into Star Wars and the lore and the canon and all of that and the history. But, all of this stuff happens and Star Wars fans say, oh, well, maybe the prequels weren't as bad as we thought. You start seeing articles, why the prequels weren't actually as bad as we first thought, why we underestimated the prequels. The prequels are actually good. You start seeing all these fans and critics and journalists turning their back on their original opinion and the things they said about George and everything about the prequels. And now apparently the prequels are just as untouchable and as godlike as the original trilogy, which I have never agreed with. But for people to say that, hypocritical, but sure. Let's go with that, right? Let's say that after all this time we realize, oh God, the prequels were underrated. We didn't appreciate them at the time. That to me is not the problem, the main problem. The main problem is that now we have 3 more movies, the sequel trilogy, and the Star Wars fan base for the most part, mostly, I hate to say it, those same prequel lovers now have the audacity to bash on the sequels in the way that they do. Don't get me wrong here. You can hate a movie. You can criticize a movie. But when the things you apparently love about other movies are objectively worse and hypocritical and contrasting to the things you say about the other films, when that happens, that's where I have the problem. You hear it all the time. The prequel lovers will say, "Oh, the sequels, they steal too much from the original trilogy. They hardly have any of their own ideas. The story is terrible." But the prequels, they'll argue, "Oh, the prequels have such original ideas. They bring so much to the Star Wars franchise, blah, blah, blah. They tell such a good story and way better than the sequels." And I'm sorry, I have to say, no, they don't. And to the point of, regarding the point of, oh, at least the prequels have more original ideas than the sequels, yeah, sure, maybe they do. But having more original ideas doesn't mean that those ideas are more quality than maybe the borrowed qualities or maybe even stolen qualities of the original trilogy that the sequel trilogy tries to use. Just because you come up with an original idea doesn't mean that it's going to be good. And most of the ideas presented in the prequel trilogy, at least in my opinion, are not that great. They really are not. And most of the storytelling in the prequels is god awful. And yes, you can call that an opinion, which it technically is. But I feel like I am not wrong when I say objectively the narrative of the prequels is so much weaker compared to the sequels. So it does baffle me a lot when by the way, again, the same people who bashed on the prequels for like a decade or more are now saying, oh, they're beautiful, they're perfect. They tell the story of Anakin so perfectly. They're just, oh, George is just an underrated genius. I just can't agree. And when they go and defend something like the prequels and then bash on the sequels, again, you can have your opinions. it is not a problem to me for you to enjoy the prequels more than the sequels. But the certain points that the fan base uses against the sequels and then what they defend in the prequels is what baffles me the most. No matter what trilogy you like the most, you are not wrong. But you can't be hypocritical about it, I guess is what I'm saying. Maybe I haven't described this well enough, but this is just what I see. I would prefer if we didn't hate on any trilogy, because let me rephrase. Hate on the people who are fans of the trilogies. You can hate on the trilogies all you want. I absolutely hate the prequel trilogy with all of my heart. I hate that trilogy so much. Everything that it tried to accomplish, it pretty much failed. Maybe it got like 5% of what it tried to accomplish, but the other 95% is dog shit. Excuse my language, but it didn't accomplish at all what it was trying to do, what George Lucas's vision was. It just did not. That's just what I see. But there are people who like that trilogy, and I'm not going to hate on them for liking it. I would defend the fact that the sequels do a lot of things better, and hey, don't be a hypocrite about it, and please don't hate on the sequel trilogy. But I will not hate on you for liking the prequels. And I guess that's another point, is that it also baffles me, and I know I use the word baffle a lot, but I can't think of a lot of more words. It baffles me that the prequel lovers who were hated on for so long, because eventually they got their own hate too. Like, for a while they were a little bit niche until it grew that the prequel fan base is a lot bigger now. They were hated on, and now they have the audacity to hate on the sequel lovers. What the hell? How is your trilogy going to be considered terrible at the beginning and then eventually good, but then the sequel trilogy comes out? Yes, you can hate it, but why? I see so many people online bully the sequel lovers and anybody who defends the sequels as good or as their favorite trilogy. I can't understand why they would do that, especially when their trilogy was considered to be the worst at a point in time. Just, of course, nothing can be a perfect utopia, but wouldn't it just be beautiful if all of us could enjoy the trilogy we like the most without having to worry about the other people hating on us for liking that trilogy? Of course, anybody can always hate the trilogy that you like or the movies that you like, but to hate on the people for liking it, that's where I just think the line should have been drawn, and it hasn't been. Anybody can make a bad film. And the Star Wars franchise at this point has been in a lot of hands in terms of directors. The original trilogy had 3 different directors. George directed all 3 of the prequels. The sequels were directed by J.J. and Ryan. No matter who you give the title of director to, no matter what franchise it is, no matter how beloved it was in the past, no matter how hated it was in the past, somebody can always make a bad movie. Even if I think J.J. was a great director. I think he did a great job with The Force Awakens. I don't think he did that great of a job with The Rise of Skywalker, and that can happen with anybody. Just the way I see it, I think I had an original point with all of this. I've kind of forgotten it, but the way I see it, anybody can make a bad film. I think you should just love the films that you love, no matter what franchise it is, but obviously we're talking about Star Wars, so I'll keep it in Star Wars. Like the Star Wars films you like, hate the ones that you hate, but don't hate the people for loving the ones that they love. Don't hate the people for hating the ones they hate. It goes both ways. Enjoy yourself, let other people enjoy themselves. Now, my final few points here on Star Wars as a whole. The Skywalker saga is done. It's over. So I think we need to accept that fact. I see a lot of people saying, oh, we need to save Ben Solo. I don't know, they want to change some plot elements of the sequels. No, we don't get to do that. No, I don't think anybody should be able to do that. I mean, sure, it's going to happen in the novelization, but I don't think the movie needs a re-release with different plot elements. I think that would be incredibly stupid. The story that was told was told. Same with the prequels. And again, the prequels were hated. Could you imagine if, because of how much hate the prequels got, they were retold? Do you think you would like that? Probably not. So let's accept each trilogy for as they are and move on. The Skywalker saga has closed, and the last bit of content that we're going to get for Skywalker saga is not in film form. It is going to be a novelization and the Season 7 of the Clone Wars, which, by the way, so far is pretty good. Episode 3 actually came out this morning. I'm going to watch it after this. But that is the last bit of Skywalker saga content we're getting, and we need to accept what the Skywalker saga is for the good and the bad, what we love and what we hate. So it's time to move on from that. Another thing that we need to accept is that Disney still owns the franchise. A lot of people wish that that wasn't the case. I think it's fine that way. But even if I didn't like it, it would still be my duty, I believe, to accept that. They own it. Whether you like Disney or not, you want to call them the capitalist pigs that only use Star Wars for the money, they own it. And they're going to milk the hell out of Star Wars. We already know that there's a new trilogy planned out. They've announced a new, what is it called? High Republic book series, which a lot of people seem to like the idea of that, but they're going to milk it. But let's at least be happy that they're not going to milk too much of the Skywalker saga anymore. If your main problem is the milking of the franchise, at least a lot of it isn't going to be the Skywalker saga. Most of it is going to be new content, maybe in the same universe, but unrelated to the Skywalker saga. So let's just be happy about that at least, and accept that they own it, and they're going to do what they want with it. They're going to make their pretty penny off of it. And most likely, I guarantee that despite how much you hate that Disney owns it, you're going to go see the new films, which, by the way, new one comes out in 2022. We don't know anything about it besides that it's unrelated, but it's coming out. So those are just, the two major things that I see as what Star Wars fans need to accept. Skywalker saga is over for the most part, and Disney owns the franchise. And I guess the third point is also that we need to just come together as a community and just love Star Wars. Love what you love, hate what you hate, and accept your neighbor's opinion on their opposites and the sames, And that was the main point of this video. That's what I wanted the bulk of this to be. I want the Star Wars franchise to be better. Or not the franchise, I'm sorry, the community to be better. And I am, while not entirely happy with everything that has come out of the franchise, original, prequel, and sequel, it is what it is, and it's fairly over for all of that content. And we're getting more, but I am accepting of what it is. We can't change it. So that's what this video was meant to be. And again, I am a huge Star Wars fan. I have been since the age of 5. And so this is a very passionate topic for me. And yeah, that's it. Thank you.